things started to go wrong soon after you arrived. Now, I can understand your initial shock coming face to face with Max's, especially after so long. But you did the right thing. You followed the plan. You brought the summoning key here, and you destroyed that bloody machine once and for all. Thing is, Max's went and ballsed everything up.
Please, you must help me.
He heard voices, you see, calling to him.
Only together can we prevent the destruction of your world.
It wasn't really his fault. You know, he hasn't actually got his soul yet. All I got was a brain. Anyway, the key thing, as in the thing that is key, is that Max has fiddled around with the summoning thingamajig and accidentally released an even bigger bastard. Someone even I didn't know was in there. The Shadow Man. The one and only original Harbinger of Doom.
Hello, my dear friends, my fellow comrades. Hope everyone is doing well. I doubt if anyone will catch on to the allegory slash references slash allusions that I'm creating from pulling in some Call of Duty Zombies lore into my little online presence. But I'm gonna cut through a lot of this. If you're catching on, please let me know what you're thinking. I promise you, if you pick up on it, it will be well worth it. So let's talk about something real quick. What I'm about to explain is something that I typically would reserve my absolutions with. As in, I typically would not say, this is how it's happening. I would say, I believe this is how it's happening, and then supporting evidence, etc., etc. But I'm actually going to not do that. I'm going to assert absolution in what I'm about to say. The trading volume that we see every day between AMC and GameStop and Mullen and a handful of other picks are predominantly coming from market makers. This is something that we all know, but it's not the way you think. Of all of the parts of the market that we think we're familiar with, things like short interest, things like options, things like swaps, things like you name it, I believe are being used in the most unexpected, perhaps unethical ways any market has ever seen. I believe that all of the volume we see being traded is predominantly market makers hedging. And the reason why I say this is because the float of, in particular, AMC and GameStop are not being traded as the float of the company. They are being traded as the last rations left to a liquid, publicly traded security. If we all recall, back in January, the majority of the stock, if not all of it, so I'm gonna zoom in on this. For some reason, Fintel's not showing the chart, and I know someone's gonna fucking go, Fintel, it's Fintel, I can't read. Shut the fuck up. Jesus fucking Christ. The institutional ownership on GameStop totals out as the net long position, as in what is actually owned after everything is accounted for, comes out to 23 million shares. Now, mind you, the shares outstanding is approximately 70 million. So 33% of GameStop is owned by institutions. The same thing is for AMC. 187 million shares are owned long by institutions, which comes out to approximately 36%. On GameStop, the actual percentage comes out to 30%. So a third of the stock that exists, right? And this is accounting for vanilla market mechanics without any tinfoil hat stuff from retail. A third of both of these companies are owned by institutions. That means that in theory, a third of the float is locked up within institutional holdings. If we then account for things like Adam Aron saying that retail owns 90% of AMC Entertainment's entire float before even accounting for ETFs or institutional holdings. On top of that, I think it can go without question that GameStop is in the exact same boat and probably even egregiously higher because the SEC report reported 240% short interest on GameStop in January of 21. We know that at least a third, just from official numbers, literally from SEC-approved filings and filings submitted from institutions, says that a third of these companies is locked up. Okay, cool. After that, if we were to assume, and I know that for the majority of us that are combating this fucked up market, that the majority of us can say that retail owns the floats, right? In that case, even with numbers that have come from official sources, retail owns whatever is the remainder. When did all this buying happen from institutions? June of 21, going forward. Interesting. Okay. GameStop's happened. I think this fucking graph is behind or something. I don't know. But anywho, point being, ever since June of 21, this thing has been locked up. If you wanted to actually have a fair exchange without any intermediary intervention, you would have to do, I don't know, talk to God, because retail, for the majority, has bought and is holding. Institutions, for the majority, have bought and are holding. There is a stalemate in liquidity going on. Okay, well, in the event of a stalemate in liquidity, who has the authority to issue shares that don't actually exist? This would be market makers and prime brokerages. Real quick, simple explanation. Market makers are your people like Citadel and Virtue, so on and so forth. These particular individuals are the ones that actually facilitate markets. They are market makers. They have certain privileges that allow them to issue phantom shares, naked shorts. There are so many different branches that come off of these terms, whatever you want to use. The one in particular has to do with what is called short exempt volume. Short exempt volume is a privilege that market makers have where in the event that they can't source liquidity to take on the other side of a trade, say I want to go and buy 100 shares of GameStop, if there aren't 100 shares right then and there to fulfill my order, someone like Citadel can issue short exempt volume where they're creating shares that don't exist. This is all electronic. They're supplying the opposite side of the trade I'm trying to create. So I'm buying 100 shares. They're selling 100 shares to me. So I get best execution, which is a load of shit. Point being, market makers are allowed to do this. Those short exempt transactions have up to T+6, I believe, to be settled in full, where the locate requirement of those shares has to be satisfied and purchased and settled. In some instances, it can be delayed up to T+35. We've covered that a lot around here already. So we're just going to stick with the T+6, which comes out to about 7 days, business days, that they can find those shares. So there's another website. I promise I'll bring this all together. There's another fantastic website. These guys are incredible, and no one has talked about them. I've been trying to help get them some attention. It's a website called apparentlyexempt.com. And what apparentlyexempt.com does is they supply an entire data feed where short exempt volume is seemingly being abused via algorithmic trading. You can actually search for stocks to check this out. So we'll put in GameStop, and it's going to tell me and you all of the days that short exempt volume was apparently abused, because a large majority of the short sales from that day, not short exempt, but short sales, are from short exempt volume. The percentage of short exempt volume is greater than usual on regular short volume. This is typically seen when SSR is activated. The short selling restriction, it's what happens when a stock loses 10% or more of its value in a single day. That's where, after that condition is met, anyone selling short cannot sell short on a downtick. So if the price is at a crossroads where the buy is 10 and the sell is 10.01, you cannot short that down tick if it has been met down. I'm sorry that there's a lot of information going left and right now. Just bear with me. I promise this will all come together. So I'm gonna try to bring all this up, wrap it up, fucking bow on it, and ship it. My point being, the float is locked by more than one party, more than retail. The other portion of it, where in the event the float is not locked, the mechanic for solving that liquidity crunch is seemingly being abused. Okay. So in that case, if no one's selling and no one's buying, we're just fucking bear with me. Don't get angry because I said that. In the event that no one is selling and no one is buying, then how do you facilitate volume? Because then we have something called days to cover. And what days to cover does is takes the total short interest and then compares that against the average volume. Now, in the event that your average volume is significantly below the total short interest, your metric of days to cover, how many days would it take to cover your position short, goes skyrocketing. And when that skyrockets, you'll have other institutions target a particular stock because they know that if there's 100 million shares short and the average trading volume is 50 million, then that means it would take 2 days worth of transactions to actually exit that position in which case you can easily squeeze anybody who holds a substantial short position. Now, the only thing that can change that formula, or that output rather, is, well, two things. You can cover your position, which we've seen quite fucking frankly well that is not the case, or you can increase the volume traded. Something happened in this, or like this, in Mullen. Mullen had out of nowhere, shout out and credit to True Demon on this, Mullen had a surge of 10,000% of its daily volume happen, no more than March 1st. Now, mind you, Mullen was already thinly traded, and you can see this happen in the past where it looks like someone's being squeezed out of a position, but they're not. They're engineering that daily volume metric so that their days to cover goes down, so that algorithms and other human fund managers don't target that particular stock, because in the event that no one's trading it, your short position becomes a huge fucking liability. Okay, so let's get back to putting the fucking bow on it. I'm almost done tying it. So where does that bring us now? The float is locked. You got DRS, which I won't take a position on, but that's another factor to consider here. You have DRS, you have institutional ownership at a fucking all-time high. You have retail's ownership that breaks a metric of all-time high because retail owns the float of both of these fucking companies. So how do you see the volume that takes place day to day? Where does all of this trading come from? How can we see, for example, GameStop had its entire float traded on the day that we saw ourselves up 30 or 40 or 50%. How does that make any sense? Who's trading? Who's fucking up at 4:15 in the morning doing these fucking bulk trades that slam the price 10% before opening bell? I wonder. It ain't fucking retail, I know that. So here's my conclusion here. Shout out to UnusualWhales. Yes, they're an affiliate of the channel. I'm not doing this to fucking plug my shit. I don't even care. Let's take a look at how options work. So options are actually an instrument for hedging. Options are meant for hedging a position. If you were to go short 100 shares of something, you want to have some hedging, right? So if you're short 100 shares, you can buy a call with a delta of 1. Now, if you're not familiar with the Greeks, I strongly urge you to at least read up on delta and gamma. But in this instance, if you were to be short 100 shares and you bought one call with a delta of 1, if the share price went to $1 million, you wouldn't be forced out of your position. You'd be entirely hedged for, because that call that you purchased actually simulates owning 100 shares. Now, mind you, these calls eventually expire, but in the meantime, you're good. And by that time, you're assuming that the share price would fall and blah, 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 blah. But for the sake of this point, that is how you can hedge. And it's the same thing inversely. If you're long 100 shares and you want to protect yourself from downside, you just buy a put with a delta of 1, because each of these contracts gives you the right to buy or sell 100 shares of something. Now, let's bring this even more full circle here. I think what is happening is, if you were to look at the log of any whale trades that are going on, this is GameStop's right here. AMC's is actually a bit more coherent, so I'm gonna use that. Set your filters to today's trades. You can do the volume greater than open interest and blah blah blah, but I'm not gonna do that right now. And the premium range I set to a minimum of $25,000. If we take a little look-see-poo at what's going on, the volume that we see is entirely delta hedging. This volume has nothing to do with what retail is doing. That's not to say that there isn't some retail orders being slipped through in this, but I have something that's even more fucking gargantuan in theory. So float is locked up. Institutions own a lot, retail owns more, yet neither side is selling. What could be going on? Well, as a fund, you consult with prime brokerage services, aka banks. Now, these banks have the ability to do a lot of really fucked up things, because they also get some really special, neat privileges that retail and whoever isn't a trust fund baby doesn't have. And in this case, prime brokerage services, banks, can issue naked shares or phantom shares. But even worse is that they are in direct contact with market makers, and market makers can also do the same. Now, what I think is happening is, when we see the price move the way it does, I don't think any real shares are being exchanged between funds or market makers. I think it's literally just market maker to market maker, and it's the result of a fund steering the direction of the price via derivatives, aka options. You might be more familiar with a term called max pain. That's also what causes this to be at play. So let me put it to you this way. So we're going to take a transaction from here. I've got two particular big options trades that took place on the screen. This first one right here was a $22.50 strike call sold at 12:23 p.m. Eastern, and I have that notated. There was a handful, actually. But this one in particular, which came at 12:24, pretty much 12:25, actually. You saw all these calls being sold. And Unusual Whales has that marked as bearish, which this is. Because when you sell a call, you're implicitly shorting the stock. Not literally, you're not directly supplying any downward pressure, but because you sold calls, the market maker is actually taking on that risk as well. So market makers will do what's called delta hedging. And essentially, if market makers have written a particular call that we'll say has, where's my fucking whiteboard? Okay, so the market maker does what's called a sell to open. Let's say that this call has a delta of 0.5. Now what that means is that for every dollar the underlying moves up, that becomes 50 cents in options premium. Now with options premium, and this is a semantics thing, I'm not going to pay too much more attention to this, because there's 100 shares, basically every share within that option contract is increased by 50 cents. This number is no greater than 1 and no less than 0.01. So in that case, a market maker will actually delta hedge by buying 50 shares because the contract itself, at the time of expiration, if its intrinsic value comes out to 0.5, which it wouldn't because this means it's out of the money, but whatever, the market maker will naturally and automatically, as a knee-jerk reaction, hedge for this so that in the event that someone just decides to exercise this, they have the additional 50 shares on hand. Now, as the day goes on, this delta might become 0.75 because the share price is going up. In which case, if this is unhedged for, the market maker will then go and buy 25 shares. Now, in this case, it's entirely flip-flopped because it's the market maker selling these as an order from a prime broker or from a fund of some sort. At the end of the day, the market maker is the one facilitating the majority of any of the options that you see happening. So in this case, because they're selling, this actually means they're selling 25 shares. We're selling 50 shares. And because they're market makers, guess what? They get to use short exempt volume for this. That's your phantom shares, your naked shares, yada, 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 yada. Now, theoretically, what would happen if someone decided, we don't have many shares of this thing, and we can't have it go up? Fuck it. Let's just get all the premium from selling a call, or fuck it, we'll do 1,000 calls at once. What if we sell 1,000 calls that are in the money? We'll just sell 140 calls, reap the premium, and then short it on the way down to magnify the amount of downward pressure we're getting. Because guess what happens? Then what you can do is on the way down, and someone check me on the semantics of this, but I know this is at play. Because on the way down, you've just collected, call it 100,000 in premium. That's in the money. You collected 100,000 in premium that you can then post as collateral, if you're required to post collateral even, to short the stock yourself, while the market maker is doing the same thing because of delta hedging. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, you want to know why the stock went down and why volume surged out of nowhere? Because a bunch of in-the-money calls were sold, and then I'd be willing to bet, and I'm going to check the fucking CBOE on this one, that you're going to see a spike in short exempt volume, and you're also going to see a spike in short sales. Because what this fucking schmuck just did is they just magnified their downward pressure. And then at the end of it, they just undo it. They'll buy those calls back or buy a portion of them back, and then you'll see the market maker follow suit because they're doing their own delta hedging. Now let's see what happens when we have a bullish instance of this. So look at this. At 13:16, so 1:16 in the afternoon, out of the money puts were sold to open that don't expire for 2 fucking years. What happened when they did that? What? Wow, that was some damn good timing. What'd they also do? Oh, they also closed their fucking short leg. They bought those 22 fives back. And then we start talking about the cycle and shit. Here it is. So they closed their short leg and then went bullish. They collected the premium on both sides. Like, this is fucking blatant. It's right here. It's fucking right here. So now they're intensifying both directions, all while retail I think that myself and a lot of other brilliant minds in this community have somewhat remedied this stupid fucking mental delusion, but retail thinks that options are bad. You want to know why? Because this is where all of the fucking price action is happening, and anyone who tells you options are bad are not in it to fucking help you. They're in it to help themselves and whoever the fuck is committing crimes like this shit. If you think options are bad, open a fucking book. This is what's happening. So they closed their short, and they also shorted on the long side of things. They literally... They have a short leg on the puts, and when you sell a put short, you're actually bullish on the stock because it loses value going up, so that when you sell it to open, you buy it to close cheaper because the stock went up. Here you fucking go. This produces delta hedging in the inverse direction because now the market maker is buying shares in the event that someone decides to exercise the put in the event that it goes in the money. Going into 13:20, so 1:22 in the afternoon. Look what happened at 13:22. 4 instances of someone selling in the money calls that don't expire for about 3.5 months. This came out to approximately 200 contracts. And who's at the front of the fucking line when it comes to buying and selling shares on an exchange? Market makers. So immediately that this fucking thing goes through and executes, someone's already ready to short on the way down with the market maker shorting on the way down. And then you see the surge in volume. This is literally what max pain is, by the way. This is what max pain is. This is max pain. So, I know this was a fucking long video, but case in point, TLDR, the stock price is being steered via derivatives. Just look at any quasi-real-time options alert service. You'll see it right in front of you. Ta-ta.